Welcome to the silent personalities and empire collapses. A caliph dies, betrayal spreads from within, and in the middle of it all one man begins to rise, not by chance, not by luck, but through strategy, power, and decisions that would change history forever. This is the moment Saladin stopped being just a commander and started becoming a legend. But tell me this, if you were in his place, would you have shown mercy or destroyed every enemy before they could rise against you? According to Ahmad ad-Din al-Isfahani, Nur ad-Din wrote to Saladin in June 1171, urging him to restore the Abbasid Caliphate in Egypt. Just 2 months later, Saladin carried out this request, strengthened by additional pressure from Najm ad-Din al-Qablashani, a Shafi'i scholar who strongly opposed Shia rule in Egypt. Several Egyptian emirs were executed, though Al-Adid was told they had been killed for rebelling against him. Soon after, Al-Adid fell seriously ill or, according to some accounts, was poisoned. During his illness, he asked Saladin to visit him so he could entrust his young children to his care. But Saladin refused, fearing a possible plot against the Abbasids. It's said that he later regretted this decision after realizing Al-Adid's true intentions. On September 13th, Al-Adid died. Just 5 days later, the Abbasid Kuba was proclaimed in Cairo and Al-Fustat, officially recognizing al-Mustadi as caliph. On September 25th, Saladin left Cairo to join Nur ad-Din in a coordinated attack on the desert fortresses of Kerak and Montreal, strongholds of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But before reaching Montreal, Saladin suddenly turned back. Reports had reached him that, in his absence, Crusader leaders were supporting internal conspiracies in Egypt, particularly among the remaining Fatimid loyalists who aimed to weaken his power and restore their former rule. Because of this, Nur ad-Din continued the campaign alone. In the summer of 1173, a Nubian army, along with Armenian former Fatimid troops, gathered near Egypt's southern border, preparing to lay siege to Aswan. The city's emir called for Saladin's help, and reinforcements were sent under his brother, Turan Shah. The Nubians retreated but returned later that same year, only to be driven off once again. This time, Egyptian forces pushed forward from Aswan and captured the Nubian town of Ibrahim. Following this victory, Saladin sent a remarkable gift to Nur ad-Din: 60,000 dinars, rare goods, jewels, and even an elephant. But while transporting these riches to Damascus, Saladin seized the opportunity to strike at Crusader lands. Instead of attacking fortified castles, he targeted the Muslim Bedouins living under Crusader control, aiming to deprive the Franks of local guides. On July 31st, 1173, tragedy struck. Saladin's father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, was severely injured in a horse-riding accident and died on August 9th. The following year, Saladin sent Turan Shah to conquer Yemen, securing the vital port of Aden and expanding the reach of the Ayyubid dynasty. By early summer of 1174, Nur ad-Din was preparing for something much bigger. He began assembling a massive army, calling forces from Mosul, Diyarbakir, and the Jazeera, seemingly preparing for a campaign against Egypt. When this news reached Saladin, the Ayyubid leadership held urgent discussions. Saladin began gathering his own forces outside Cairo, but before anything could unfold, everything changed. On May 15th, Nur ad-Din died after a sudden illness. His vast power passed to his 11-year-old son, Asli Ismail al-Malik. For Saladin, this moment was seismic. In a letter to the young ruler, he promised to act as a sword against his enemies and described his father's death as nothing less than an earthquake. Now, Saladin faced a defining decision. Should he march against the Crusaders from Egypt, or wait for an invitation from Syria, or take the boldest step of all seize Syria before it fell into the hands of rivals? But there was a problem. Syria had belonged to his former master, Nur ad-Din. Attacking it without justification could make Saladin appear disloyal and unfit to lead the Muslim world. So he chose a careful path. He would wait, unless chaos forced his hand. That chaos came quickly when young Asli was moved to Aleppo. A powerful emir named Gumushtajin took control as his guardian. Almost immediately, he began consolidating power, eliminating rivals across Syria and the Jazeera. In desperation, the emir of Damascus sought help from Mosul but was refused. With no other option, they turned to Saladin, and this time, he answered. Saladin set out across the desert with just 700 elite horsemen. As he advanced, more and more emirs, soldiers, and Bedouins joined him, their loyalty clear in their faces. On November 23rd, he entered Damascus to widespread acclaim. He stayed briefly in his father's old home before turning his attention to the citadel. Its commander initially refused to surrender, but after a short siege, led by his brother Tatakin ibn Ayyub, the gates were open. Saladin took control of the city. Damascus was his dot from there. His campaign moved forward with precision. Hama fell quickly. Homs resisted longer, but eventually its citadel was taken in March 1175. Then came Aleppo on December 30th. Saladin laid siege to the city after Gumushtajin refused to step down. Inside, young Asali appealed to the people, begging them not to surrender. For a moment, it worked. Even Saladin's own chroniclers admitted the people were under his spell. But the conflict was far from over. Gumushtajin reached out to Rashid ad-Din Sinan, leader of the feared Order of Assassins, to eliminate Saladin. On May 11, 1175, 13 assassins infiltrated Saladin's camp. They came close, too close, but they were discovered at the last moment. One was killed immediately, the others cut down as they tried to escape. Saladin survived, and the war continued. The Ayyubids allowed Baldwin IV of Jerusalem to enter Ascalon with his famous Gaza-based Knights Templar without taking any precautions for a sudden attack, even though the Crusader force was small. Just 375 knights. Saladin hesitated to ambush them. The reason? The presence of highly skilled Templar commanders. But on November 25th, everything changed. With much of the Ayyubid army scattered, Saladin and his men were suddenly caught off guard near Ramla, in what would become known as the Battle of Montgisard. Before they could even form proper battle lines, the Templar Knights charged in, cutting through Saladin's forces in brutal, close combat. At first, Saladin tried to rally his troops to organize some kind of defense, but as his personal guards began to fall around him, it became clear defeat was inevitable. With only a small group of survivors, Saladin fled the battlefield, riding swiftly on a camel, all the way back toward Egypt. But this defeat did not break him, not even close. By the spring of 1178, Saladin was ready to face the Crusaders again. He set up camp near the walls of Homs, where several skirmishes broke out between his generals and the Crusader forces. In Hama, his army secured a victory, bringing back spoils and prisoners of war. Saladin ordered the prisoners to be executed, accusing them of plundering Muslim lands. The rest of the year passed without a major confrontation, but something bigger was coming. Saladin's intelligence network soon revealed that the Crusaders were planning a raid into Syria. He acted immediately. One of his generals, Farik Shah, was sent to guard the Damascus frontier with 1,000 men. His orders were clear: avoid direct battle, monitor enemy movement, and light signal fires on the hills if an attack began. In April 1179, the Crusaders, led once again by Baldwin, believed there would be no resistance. They moved forward, preparing to strike Muslim herders near the Golan Heights. But Baldwin moved too quickly, too confidently. He chased Farik Shah's forces without realizing they were being led straight into a trap. The Ayyubid army struck back and crushed them. After this victory, Saladin called for reinforcements from Egypt, requesting 1,500 additional horsemen under his brother Al-Adil. Then came the summer of 1179. Baldwin established a new outpost on the road to Damascus at a strategic crossing over the Jordan River, known as Jacob's Ford. It was a critical position. Saladin even offered 100,000 gold coins to have the project abandoned. But Baldwin refused. So Saladin made his decision. If it couldn't be bought, it would be destroyed. He marched toward the fortress known as Chase Saladin, set up his headquarters at Banias. When the Crusaders moved out to engage, their forces quickly fell into disorder. Infantry lagged behind, formations broke apart. At first, they seemed to gain the upper hand, but they pushed too far. And that was their mistake. Saladin regrouped his army, turned the tide, and launched a devastating counterattack. The result? A decisive Ayyubid victory. Many high-ranking knights were captured. Soon after, Saladin laid siege to the fortress, and on August 30th, it fell. In the spring of 1180, Saladin was near Safad, preparing for another major campaign against the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But this time, Baldwin sent peace proposals. Drought and poor harvests had weakened Saladin's supply lines, so he agreed to a truce. Not everyone accepted it. Raymond of Tripoli strongly opposed the agreement, but after Saladin launched raids into his territory and his naval fleet appeared near Tartus, he had no choice but to accept. In June 1180, Saladin hosted a grand reception for Nur ad-Din Muhammad, ruler of Kifa. Lavish gifts were exchanged worth over 100,000 dinars. This wasn't just generosity, it was strategy. Saladin was strengthening alliances and sending a message to every ruler in the region. Soon, tensions rose between Nur ad-Din and Kilij Arslan II. Saladin tried to mediate between them, but Arslan refused to cooperate. When accusations escalated, Saladin even threatened military action, warning that he could reach Malatya in just 2 days. That was enough. Negotiations began immediately. In the end, a compromise was reached, but Saladin made one thing clear. He would not betray those who trusted him. At the beginning of 1181, Saladin returned to Cairo. He had planned to spend Ramadan in Egypt and then perform the Hajj pilgrimage, but for reasons unknown, those plans changed. Instead, he focused on internal matters, inspecting the Nile, dealing with Bedouin unrest, and cracking down on those accused of trading with the Crusaders. Some lost their lands, others were forced to migrate, and along the Nile, Ayyubid warships were deployed to hunt down river pirates. That same year, political tensions rose within Yemen. A former official, Majd ad-Din, was arrested on charges of corruption, but Saladin himself wasn't convinced. He ordered his release in exchange for a large payment. Even here, Saladin showed something different. Not just power, but control. Meanwhile, major changes were unfolding across the region. Leaders died, alliances shifted, and by December 1181, the young Zengid ruler Asli was gone. Power was once again up for grabs. In May 1182, Saladin left Cairo for what would be his final departure from Egypt. The night before he left, a line of poetry was recited, a warning, an omen, and it proved true. He would never see Egypt again. Taking a desert route through Sinai, Saladin avoided Crusader interception and moved toward Syria. Along the way, he struck at enemy lands while Baldwin watched unable or unwilling to respond. By June, Saladin was back in Damascus. From there, the campaign continued. His forces pushed into Galilee, raiding, capturing, and advancing deeper into Crusader territory. But not every battle could be won. Near Belvoir Castle, the fighting ended without a clear victor, and Saladin was forced to withdraw. He moved next to Beirut, joining forces with his fleet and laying siege to the city. But after days with no progress, he pulled back, his attention now shifting east. A new opportunity had emerged. The ruler of Harran, Geikbari, invited Saladin to take control of the Jazira region. This was the moment. The truce with the Zengids ended, and the next phase of Saladin's rise began. Crossing the Euphrates, Saladin's army swept through the region. City after city fell. Edessa, Saruj, Rak, New Sabin. Some resisted. Most surrendered. At Rak, Saladin made a bold move, canceling taxes and easing burdens on the people. He declared, "The worst rulers are those whose treasuries are full, while their people are poor." As victories mounted, news arrived. The Crusaders were raiding Damascus. Saladin's response? Let them raid villages, while we take cities. And with that, the balance of power was shifting, not just in battle, but across the entire region. And with that, the balance of power was shifting, not just in battle, but across the entire region. But this was only the beginning. The real war, the defining battles, and the moment Saladin faces his greatest enemies are still ahead. So if you want to see what happens next, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel, because part 3 is coming, and you don't want to miss it.